call to order the regular meeting of the Kenmore City Council. Would you all stand and join me in the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
You want to do the roll call?
Yeah, I know. It isn't on my notes here from Patty. No roll call. Patty, City Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Mayor Baker,
Excused.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness,
Here?
Councilmember Brent Smith,
Here.
Councilmember Sperry,
Excused.
Councilmember Curtis,
Present.
Councilmember Herbig,
Here.
Councilmember Danuski.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sperry is walking in.
Oh, there she is. Good. Okay. If there are no additions or corrections, the agenda stands approved as presented.
Did we have an additional presentation?
Huh?
Did we have an
Not yet.
additional presentation?
Not according to Patty's notes, sir. We'll
From
do
the
that.
judges?
No, there isn't an additional presentation.
Is that in there?
No, it's on here. Okay, so agenda stands approved as submitted. We have with us today a presentation from King County District Court Judge Marcine Anderson and Patrick Wells, West Division Director. Welcome.
Thank you. I do have, and thank you for inviting us tonight. My name is Marcine Anderson, and I'm one of the King County District Court judges. And Judge Douglas Smith is the other judge, and he sends these regrets. He had another commitment that he couldn't make it this evening. But I brought with me Patrick Wells, who's the director of the West Division, and the West Division includes the Seattle Courthouse, third floor of the Seattle Courthouse, as well as the Shoreline District Courthouse in Seattle. I'm this year, last year and this year, I'm the presiding judge of the West Division, and Patrick is our director there. I have a slideshow on your computer. There's going to be one up here. And I'm just going to talk with you a little bit about the King County District Court. And one of the things that I'm certainly going to weave through all this is a discussion about some of the new technology and technological changes that we're doing at the court to be more efficient, to make improvements with contact with the people that come to the court system. And the first slide is King County District Court. I don't know if you've ever been there, but this is where it is. It's on a meridian between 185th and 180th, and it's to the right. We kind of look like the community center next to Cromwell Park, but that's the courthouse. The next thing is, in the last year, we've updated our webpage. I'm the person that did this slideshow presentation, so I didn't know how to cut it and paste it, so I took a photo of that, our webpage. But a couple of new features, and you can see it's all, we've organized things based on how many contacts they are with certain topic areas. We've also added a live chat feature so that if people want to actually speak with a real live person through our website, they can do that. And we have dedicated call center staff that can actually respond to phone callers who reach us through the website. A little bit about King County District Court, and I'm talking about the entire court here. In some places I've gotten down specifically to the city of Kenmore, but we do have had in the last year about a 250,000 cases, with 20.36% of those cases or filings being filed as a result of service contracts with cities. In 2015, we don't have the 2016 data yet, but in 2015, the city of Kenmore filed 3,048 cases. And also, if you folks have any questions while I'm speaking, please just ask. I have the breakdown of those 3,048 cases if you want it. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the next slide. Okay. We do have a number of cities that contract with the court for court services. I've highlighted Kenmore and Shoreline because that's the cities that the Shoreline Courthouse serves as the municipal court for those two cities. And our geographic footprint is Kenmore, Lake Forest Park, and Shoreline. King County District Court, out of all the courts of limited jurisdiction in the state of Washington, has the greatest number of problem-solving courts. We have a mental health court, we have a veterans court, and we have a domestic violence court. The mental health court and the veterans court are in Seattle, in Kent at our Regional Justice Center, and then it is, I'm going to say it's in Rubman, right?
Which?
The mental health court and veterans court.
They're both in downtown Seattle.
Okay. And then the domestic violence court is in Kent at the Regional Justice Center. And we have a judge-supervised probation system, and we do have 2 probation officers that serve both the cities of Shoreline and Kenmore out of the Shoreline District Court. And this next slide is way too many words if you were doing this by a certain model. But what I wanted you to get out of this was that we do have the judge-supervised probation system, and we have general administrative orders that guide both how probation services are provided and also when you need to have a judge intervene in something that probation is asking us to do. And so it's not just probation, it's probation supervised by judges. And we use probation in cases where there are repeat offenders or violent offenses like domestic violence assaults or even just simple assaults, as well as driving under the influence cases. And we have access to and use a number of jail alternative programs. With the City of Kenmore, we use electronic home monitoring and community service. The King County District Court system as a whole has access to work release and work crew in addition to electronic home monitoring and community service. We have a lot of technology that we are using to be more efficient. This is when I'm going to turn to Patrick, who's going to talk with you for a couple minutes about the case management system that we are very excited about because it's going to change a lot of what we do in the court as far as technology and staffing and efficiency. Go ahead.
So the case management system is our largest project for King County District Court. We recently procured from County Council $11 million to implement it. The purpose behind it was the system that we're running on currently is quite antiquated. It's 30 years old. It falls and is hosted by the AOC, which is the Administrative Office of the Courts, which is in Olympia. And the system is called JIS, which is Judicial Integrated Systems. It's a great idea. It's one of the few states that have a very integrated system so that if a judge in Shoreline can look at cases for a defendant in Spokane, so all of Washington is on this system, and it really provides a really great source of information to make decisions, but it's very old, and it's a command-based DOS system, and so we decided that it was time to move forward technologically for several reasons. One, it just is easier for our client, the public, to access it using something more Windows-based. People technologically are used to using smartphones, computers, so we wanted to create a public portal that was easy to navigate. And then 2, when we're bringing in new employees, they're having to take steps backwards with technology to understand our system. And so we really want to be able to move forward with the time so it's easy to access this. One of the biggest features that it's going to offer is e-filing, so people are able to electronically file their cases, because right now the only way that they can do that is to physically come to a court location or to fax it. So they're able to file cases, file documents at home or from their office, and also the public portal, which will allow people to have access to case and case information through the internet instead of having come down to the courts and having to log into a terminal to do it. The other thing that's really great about this new system is that in tandem, we're also keeping that feature that was really important with the the JIS system, and that's the integration. So we're partnering with AOC to create what's called the EDR, and that's the Electronic Data Repository. It's basically, think of it as a data warehouse that all courts can feed information into and then unpackage it when you need the information. The beauty of this is that as more courts decide to go with different vendors and different case management systems, all of them will still be connected to each other through this EDR system. We're looking to have our pilot court to start in August of 2017. We think we'll probably run the pilot court for about 6 months, and then we'll go live in 2018 with all of our courts. And the partner that we're working with is Journal Technologies. And Journal has run several case management systems in California, and they've also done several on the East Coast as well. So they're quite familiar. And we're just right now in the heart of the collaboration process and moving from our old process and procedures into the new. So if you have any questions, definitely you can contact us. But we're really excited. It's taken 30 years for us to get where we're at. So this new step in technology will put us in line where everybody else is at right now.
And what you may not know is that for a long time, I don't know when electronic court records started, but we don't have any paper files anymore. Everything is done electronically. So the next thing on your slide is the record of proceedings. We can, from our desktop, listen to court hearings that were done 5 or 6 years ago and just enter that system and listen to that. We also have video court every afternoon at 3 o'clock. We go to, well, we don't go to it physically, but we enter into the SCORE jail, which is where defendants from the city of Kenmore are housed, as well as from the city of Shoreline, and we do simple court proceedings where their attorney, the assigned public defender or their assigned private counsel doesn't have to sit right next to them in the courtroom. Our goal and our hope is to be able to do more simple types of hearings over video court, things like arraignments or simple review hearings or things like that. We also have an e-mitigation program that we started in the last year. And e-mitigation is if you got a traffic ticket, could sit at home, enter our system, and ask a judge to mitigate your case. You can either do a mitigation where you'll say that I did this, so this is what happened, and so I'd ask you to reduce my fine because of X. Or you can ask for a deferred finding, and in our system we have the ability to look at the driver's record, the ticket that was issued, and as well as any supporting documentation like insurance, proof of insurance or proof of registration that the driver uploaded into our system. And so we can do all that, and all of us get assignments to it at least 1 day a week, and we do all that online now. And one other thing is that we've tried to do is make it so that if you live in Seattle but you have a case in Shoreline, you can still access the court in Seattle if that's what you want to do. So they can, if someone got a ticket and they live in Seattle but they don't want to drive all the way up here, they can pay their ticket in Seattle. They can clear a warrant in Seattle, or if they had a Seattle warrant, they can clear it in Shoreline. We've just instituted a new bench warrant calendar so that we have a daily bench warrant calendar so that every day at 11 o'clock in the Shoreline District Court, anybody who has a bench warrant in any of the King County District Court courthouses can come in and clear a warrant in the Shoreline Courthouse, even if it was in Auburn, if the warrant was in Auburn. And we really do believe that this kind of access really will be a great access to justice for the people that the court serves. I've highlighted this in red because I'm going to give you two screens. These are the things that happen in Shoreline District Court. We handle small claims cases, which are cases up to $5,000, nuisance violations, false alarm hearings, vehicle tow and impound hearings, anti-harassment orders, domestic violence protection orders, name changes, infractions, misdemeanor and gross misdemeanor, criminal cases, and search warrants. And then the next page are other things that are handled in King County District Court, primarily in Seattle, not in the Shoreline District Court. So civil litigation up to $100,000 per claimant, expedited felony cases, felony preliminary hearings at the King County Jail. On the civil side, garnishments and other supplemental proceedings, lien foreclosure and forfeiture hearings, and inquests. And we have a full service of interpreters. We have up to 122 different languages, including American Sign Language, that we do provide. And all someone has to do for either a criminal case or civil case is request an interpreter, and the court will provide that interpreter at no charge to anybody that needs something. I wanted to tell you our most common languages are Spanish, Amharic. This is the top 5. Spanish, Amharic, Arabic, Mandarin, and Vietnamese. So those are the most common languages out of the Shoreline District Court.
Excuse me?
Yes.
I just didn't quite catch that second language that you said.
Amharic.
What is
So
that?
that's a lot of the people from either Eritrea or Ethiopia
Oh, yes.
speak that language.
Thank you.
Then there's, I didn't know that I was going to have this big of a picture up here. There's a picture of Judge Smith, and I made a mistake on my telephone number. I updated Judge Smith's and didn't update mine, so mine's just like Judge Smith's, except for instead of 2722, mine is 2711. So 206-477-2711. We have 12 clerks, 3 courtrooms, 2 security personnel, and there they are, and a training coordinator and a court manager out of the Shoreline District Court. And we do provide jury trials the last week of every month. And we get those, you get called as a juror through both the motor, we call it motor voter list. So if you have a car registered or if you're registered to vote, the administrative office of the courts puts those lists together for the court, and then we use those. We also provide passport services, and the hours are on there between 8:30 and 4 o'clock. And we can change your name. These are the things that people don't really know that the court does, because they think, oh my goodness, the only reason I come to that courthouse is because I have a ticket or I have a criminal case. But we do a lot of other things that provide services to the community. Thank you for your time. Do you have any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any questions? Councilmember Herbig? No? Councilmember Curtis?
I just have a question on the big electronic push, the portal and all that. I have some familiarity with how hard that is to implement. So I'm curious, who was the driver? I don't have a clue what your structure is. Was there somebody high up in your organization that says, we need to do this? Or was it like all the judges were saying, we're going to revolt if we don't do this? Or where did the impetus come from to do such a big project?
So, I mean, there's been a push for several years to move forward together as a collective group as part of the JIS system. But AOC sort of dragged their feet. They can't get agreement. And so there was a push by our presiding judge at the time, Judge Harn. And then we also hired a new CAO who had a technological background. And he was brought in for the purposes of getting the push together and driving this forward. And so it only took about 6 months after he came in before an RFP was started. And then you worked on that for about another half a year. We hired analysts. So the push, once he was settled and in place and sort of in line with the direction that our presiding judge and the other judges were pushing for, it took off pretty quickly.
And our system is old. And that's also sort of a factor in there, too, is that, you just don't know how long that technology is available. And I think we had consultants doing some of the work on our system, and they were the people that built that electronic court record system. And so, again, not very reliable, accurate, good, but old.
And I think also that once you start thinking of something new, everything that kind of annoyed you a little bit starts to annoy you a lot. So we started tracking how often the system was down and stuff and issues like that, and we started to see that it was actually kind of a risk management piece in there as well, especially because if a system's down on Saturday when we're doing jail calendars and stuff, we can't afford that.
Good work. Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Sperry.
Well, thank you for both of you for being here. It's always amazing to these windows into another world. One of the things that caught my attention was when you were discussing the alternative courts, like the mental health and the veterans and the domestic violence. Is that something percentage-wise that's used very often, or is there any way to characterize about how many cases?
Out of the Shoreline District Court, I would say there's at least 2 to 3, maybe I'll say 0 to 5 every month. And so what happens with that is it does take, someone has to have an Axis 1 diagnosis to be eligible for mental health court. Then the city can refer them down to mental health court, which is going to be in Seattle. And then they get, the defendant gets screened to see if they're eligible for mental health court, including their willingness to participate in mental health court. And then if they get accepted into mental health court, then the case gets closed or dismissed here in the Shoreline District Court, and then it gets handled through, and there's money, I can't remember what MID stands for, but there's money available to provide not only mental health services, but assistance with things like housing and treatment and things like that. So it's a really fabulous opportunity if someone wants to take advantage of it. And we do refer people out of the Shoreline District Court for Kenmore and Shoreline cases.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
City Manager has a comment.
Yeah, a few comments and then a question for Judge Anderson. It's an easy one, I promise. But
thank you.
So as you know, we're what we call a contract city, where we contract a lot of our responsibilities out to other agencies. This is a perfect example. The city has the choice to either do municipal court in-house or contract with King County District Court, and we've chosen to contract with King County District Court, which is great. I'm glad. My last city, we ran a municipal court, and it's actually quite a bit of work, and there's a lot of oversight, and there's risk associated with all the handling of money and all those things, and providing security during court, and all the things that you don't necessarily think about until you actually have to run a court. So, and this contract is really a pretty quiet contract. I don't have to think about it a lot, and which is also great. The way it's structured financially is King County District Court keeps all of the revenues that they collect, all the fees and fines and forfeitures. They keep all that revenue, and then they track their costs associated with running the court for Kenmore, and then they reconcile the revenue versus the costs, and every year we send what I call a subsidy. We send a payment to King County for the difference. There's kind of an urban myth out there that municipal courts are net revenue generators. Like if you want more revenue for the city coffers, just go out and have your officers write more tickets. I've never seen that be the case in any city, including my last city where we had our own municipal court, because there's the infraction side of the equation where you know the officers write tickets, but there's the criminal side of the equation, and that's the expensive side, and that always outweighs any revenues you might get from writing traffic tickets. And actually, if you write so many traffic tickets, every so often you're going to have a criminal citation. You're going to run into a drunk driver or somebody with their license suspended or somebody with a warrant. And so even if you do try to ramp up your traffic ticket writing, you'll inevitably also increase your criminal encounters as well. So we have been paying lately about $150,000 net city subsidy to the court in addition to the fines and fees they collect from us. That number has gone up. One of the things we try to do is we try to collect as much revenue from the defendants as possible, and we try to recover certain costs and things like that, and our prosecutor asks for those. But there's been a recent court case that's put a damper on that, so to speak. And Judge Anderson, could you speak to that, please?
Sure. That case is State versus Blazina, and in that case, the Supreme Court of the state of Washington, and let me get a little background. A lot of some of this case has been decided as a result of things that happened in Ferguson, and they actually cite to things that happened in Ferguson, Missouri, as one of the reasons for, as part of their analysis for the Blazina case. But if the judge makes a finding that someone does not have the current or future ability to pay non-mandatory legal and financial obligations, then the court waives those non-mandatory legal and financial obligations. So an example might be on a driving under the influence case, first offense is a day in jail plus a fine of $250 and plus costs and assessments. So that can't be waived because those are mandatory. Those are written in the state law. And also there's a criminal conviction filing fee, and there's several other fines. If someone has a shoplifting charge, which is theft in the third degree, the maximum sentence is 364 days in jail and or a fine of $5,000. And the city might ask to have $300 plus costs and assessments. But if someone does not have the present or future financial ability to pay a non-mandatory legal and financial obligation. So if we said, okay, you go to jail for a day, plus you pay a fine of $300, and assessments are about double what the fine is, we have to make a specific finding. So things that I consider are how much money that person actually owes already in outstanding legal and financial obligations, whether that person's working, what kind of job that person has. Are they unemployed? Are they underemployed? Are they getting paid under the table? And then what their housing situation is. Are they living in their car? Are they homeless? And then also, depending on the charge, there's things I always find out about folks is whether they have any kind of chemical dependency or mental health issues or things that might prevent them from ever being able to really pay a $600 fine, okay? And so if it's not mandatory, what they've advised us, instructed us in State versus Blazina is to waive those non-mandatory legal and financial obligations because, and then bringing it back to Ferguson, Ferguson had a very egregious legal and financial obligations collection system where if people owed money, they had to go to jail and things like that. And so they're just sort of looking at it as an access to justice and access to justice issue, and also trying to make it so that people really can get out of debt with the courts so that they really can move forward with their lives and do not put something on them that they're never really going to be able to pay. And then down the road, the court isn't also spending money trying to collect from people who are never going to be able to pay. So we're not putting a dollar amount on the books that we're never ever going to collect. So from a very practical aspect, I think it's a good decision in that regard too, because for some folks that we see in our court, they have already $10,000 of outstanding legal and financial obligations, and then when it goes to collections, it's about double. So then here's someone that is either addicted or homeless or underemployed or unemployed, looking at a $20,000 legal and financial obligations, and adding more to it isn't going to get us that money. So that's sort of my analysis of State versus Blazina, but I do look at their occupation, where they are medically, what kind of legal and financial obligations they already have, and also just their real ability to pay, and the crime that they're charged with.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any further questions? No?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for sharing all that with us.
Yes,
You're
thank
welcome.
you.
I think I'm going to leave this alone and let somebody else shut it off. Thank you.
Okay, now we have a proclamation. This is National Recovery Month in September 2016. Whereas mental and/or substance use disorders affect all communities nationwide, but with commitment and support, people with these disorders can achieve healthy lifestyles and lead rewarding lives in recovery. And Whereas by seeking help, people who experience mental and/or substance use disorders can embark on a new path towards improved health and overall wellness. And whereas the focus of National Recovery Month is this September, is to celebrate their journey with them with the theme, Join the Voices for Recovery, Our Families, Our Stories, Our Recovery, and whereas Recovery Month spreads the message that behavioral health is essential to health and one's overall wellness, and that prevention works, treatment is effective, and people recover. And whereas we must encourage relatives and friends of people with mental and/or substance use disorders to implement preventive measures, recognize the signs of a problem, and guide those in need to appropriate treatment and recovery support services. And whereas the impact of mental and/or substance use disorders is apparent in our local community, and through Recovery Month, people become more aware and are able to recognize the signs of mental and/or substance use disorders, which can lead more people into treatment. And whereas managing the effects of these conditions can help people achieve healthy lifestyles, both physically and emotionally. And whereas the Recovery Month observance continues to work to improve the lives of those affected by mental and/or substance use disorders by raising awareness of these diseases and educating communities about the prevention, treatment, and recovery resources that are available. Now, for these reasons, therefore, I, Alan Van Ness, Deputy Mayor, acting for Mayor David Baker of the City of Kenmore, Washington, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of September 2016 as National Recovery Month in the City of Kenmore, and call upon our community to observe this month with programs and events that support this year's observance. We have with us tonight Frank Crouch, who's the Program Manager, Frank Couch, Program Manager, King County Department of Community and Human Services, Behavioral Health and Recovery Division. Would you like to come forward and receive this? Well, thank you very much for being here, and if you'd like to say a few words to the council and the audience.
Thank you so much.
Please do.
Kenmore Council, my name is Frank Couch, and I work for the Department of Behavioral Health and Recovery. I am the quality manager, and more importantly, I'm a person in long-term recovery. So when they asked me if I would come and receive this from you folks, I absolutely would show up and do that. Since the Medicaid expansion, more people have been able to access treatment and prevention and recovery services in your community. North Shore Family Services, Center for Human Services, as well as NA and Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous. They have over 200 meetings in this area on a daily basis, and a public proclamation like this really throws some support behind folks struggling with mental illness and substance use disorder on a daily basis. There's a lot of good things going on in the recovery community. We really appreciate the proclamation and you folks stepping out in the front to do that.
Thank you.
May I speak
Thank you very much for your services.
May I speak to this?
Sure.
So as a family medicine doctor for 34 years, I would say we have made amazing progress. When I started 34 years ago, a family practice doctor couldn't even put depression or panic attack or anxiety on our diagnosis list. It all had to be medical. Well, the whole body's kind of tied together. So we've made some understanding in our diagnosis of how the whole body and the behavioral health and substance use go together. We've made amazing progress on treatments, options, and I would just say most families have someone in their family who has a behavioral health or a substance use problem. And my encouragement is don't give up. I've seen amazing stories, people who fought and struggled with heroin or other addictions, and they would maybe write me 5 years later from some other state and said, Dr. Curtis, thank you for helping me when I wasn't making much progress. But my life is now together. I have children and grandchildren, and it's made a difference. So don't give up on those people. They do change. And this is just an exciting change that I think medicine is turning, with the insurance companies supporting it so we can actually give better care.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? No? Okay. Now we have citizen comments. This is an opportunity to express your views on issues that are important to you and the community. In fairness to others, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. There's some lights on the podium there. When it turns yellow, you have 30 seconds left. When it turns red, you're out of time. So will the clerk please call the first person?
Michael Redding.
Good evening, City Council of Kenmore. My name is Michael Redding. I happen to be the Director of Crisis Services at Crisis Clinic in Seattle. It's kind of coincidence that I chose tonight to be here, really to come and say thank you to the City of Kenmore for your support of Crisis Clinic. I also happen to be a resident of Kenmore. So I said to my center, I want to be here tonight to be able to say thank you for your support. We actually are contracted by King County Division of Behavioral Health and Recovery to provide a crisis line to residents of King County. But we also look to all cities in King County for your financial support. So through your Health and Human Service Committee, you've actually been funding a small portion of what we do for the past 15 years. I looked into our records today. 2001 was the first year that City of Kenmore offered financial support. So you support the crisis line, which operates 24 hours a day. We're actually one of the oldest crisis lines in the country, second oldest to San Francisco. We've been taking crisis line calls for 52 years. I have some literature here that I could leave with you to tell you about callers that call from the City of Kenmore. 3 things I want to point out is the crisis line. One of my passions as a clinician myself, we are a licensed mental health and behavioral health center within the state of Washington, so we can help people who are calling with depression, with substance use disorders. We can help people with, my particular passion is suicide prevention. I looked into our data, and in the last year, 2015, we had over 900 calls from Kenmore residents, and 33 of those involved suicide. And if we can reach one person to save a life due to suicide prevention, I think that says a lot. So 33 calls around suicide is huge. And again, thank you for your support in doing that. We are able to link people to some critical resources in King County, such as children who are in crisis. We actually have a children's crisis outreach team that we can connect families and children to, and teachers and professionals who are working with those young people. We can connect adults in crisis to a mobile crisis team, emergency mental health appointments. So the crisis line is critical to the safety of our residents. You may have heard of 211. I have a great visual here of Kenmore and the 415 calls in 2015 where people are calling for assistance with shelter and housing, utility assistance, food assistance. 211 is about basic needs. At Crisis Connect, we are the King County 211 call center. And finally, we have Teen Link, where we reach out to teens across Washington State. And in last year, we had over 25 calls from teens in Kenmore. We actually help teens through phone calls and also online chat. And we've been able to also educate teens in high school around suicide prevention as well. So again, without the support of all of the cities in King County, especially here, the City of Kenmore, I'm really here to say thank you for your support, and I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no one else signed up.
Well, Mr. Redding, thank you very much for your comments and services that Crisis Line and Clinic does. for the citizens of Kenmore. I'm amazed that there are that many calls that you've had from the city of Kenmore. Yeah, thank you so much. Are there any other citizens who would like to comment to the body? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for your comments. Okay. I'm working off an agenda and notes that our city clerk gave us, and she says to do the consent agenda, but there is no consent agenda tonight, right? I don't see it on the agenda.
That's correct.
Okay, moving on to the business agenda. We have Richard Sawyer, Surface Water Program Manager, and Chris Overlease, Public Works Director, City Engineer, integrating low-impact development principles and best management practices into the city's development-related codes, rules, and standards.
Good evening. We are here this evening to talk about low-impact development and the city's current program to integrate that into our municipal codes and our development standards and enforceable standards that would relate to low-impact development. And I have with me tonight, the city has hired a consultant, AHBL, and I'm here with Wayne Carlson. He's a principal with AHBL and the project manager working on this with us. And next to him is Alex Campbell. He is a project planner on this project. And with the city, including myself, we actually have a committee that's working with HBL to do this, and that also includes Andrew Bauer. He's an associate planner with the city. Lori Anderson, a senior planner, and Zach Richardson is a civil engineer in public works, helping us with this as well. So it's a big project, involved many people, and we've been working on it for some time, and we're here tonight to kind of bring you up to speed with what's been going on. And I can mention now, I mean, if you have any urgent questions, feel free to ask, but if you can make it through the presentation, they'll most likely either be addressed, or if they're not addressed at the end, we'll be happy to take all your questions and comments then as well. So just a real quick overview of what we're going to do here tonight. In about the next 15 minutes or so, we just kind of want to talk about why are we here talking about low impact development, what is it, what does it look like, and then we'll move on to kind of where in our codes are we looking to make changes to integrate low impact development into them, what kind of new documents are we adopting to update our standards, and then we'll move on to kind of what we've been working on, the project schedule, where we're at, and what we have left to do, and then kind of outline where we're going, and also provide kind of a summary of the major amendments that we were proposing in the packet that was included with your agenda. But very basically, we're here to discuss kind of integrating these best management practices and these low impact development principles, and we're going to kind of talk about what those are. These are kind of two different things, so at the end of this presentation you'll be able to understand kind of how those are different and how we plan on working with those principles and BMPs. And then again, we'll kind of talk about how we're going to accomplish integrating these codes and move on from there. So why we are here, and you probably heard this many times over the last several years, NPDES, the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. So this was a program developed way back with the Clean Water Act, and it's kind of filtered down from the federal level through industrial permits, commercial permits, construction permits, agricultural permits, and then kind of where we're at now is municipal permits. So the city's in its third permit since 2007, and our current permit basically mandates that low-impact development needs to be the preferred and common approach to managing surface water for development and redevelopment. And this will impact all types of development, streets, single families, plats, multifamily developments. And so that's basically kind of why we are here doing this project. And I also like to point out that most cities around the Puget Sound and Western Washington are under a municipal NPDES permit, so they all face these exact same requirements. So it's not just Kenmore working on these code updates, it's all of our neighbors, most of the counties in Western Washington. So everybody's working on this, and we all have the deadline, December 31st, 2016, to accomplish this. So with that, I know you guys have heard me talk about this a lot, so kind of provide a fresh face. I'll pass it over to Wayne and kind of move into more what LID is.
Thanks, Richard. Next slide. So thank you. Again, my name is Wayne Carlson, and so I'm not going to kind of bore you with a lot of details that you've already heard before, but I wanted to describe LID within the context of the permit. Not necessarily the science per se, which I know you've been introduced to. You have plenty of low-impact development practices and principles right here on City Hall property. But I wanted to let you know what the permit is saying. And the permit is saying is that low-impact development is a stormwater and land use management strategy that seeks to mimic pre-disturbance hydrologic processes of infiltration, filtration, storage, evaporation through, and I'm not reading the whole thing, but small-scale distributed facilities. And the underlining that you see in this definition, I put in here, and that's related to the fact that the definition purposefully says it's a stormwater and land use management strategy. And what that means is that the design of bioretention facilities, things like bioretention or the design of permeable paving, those are your stormwater facilities, or as Richard indicated, stormwater BMPs. Those are addressed through the adoption of the Surface Water Design Manual. So the design of the practices, those BMPs, are addressed through the adoption of the Surface Water Design Manual. But Ecology, when it wrote the permit and defined LID within this Phase 2 permit, also indicated that it's a land use management strategy. So Richard also mentioned that there's BMPs and principles. So the BMPs are the engineering, and the principles are land use practices, things that relate to amendments to zoning codes or subdivision codes, or street standards, that type of thing. So I wanted to provide the distinction because adopting an update to the Surface Water Design Manual alone only kind of really addresses half of this definition. Next slide. So the key LID principles include reducing impervious surface coverage, reducing native or adapted vegetation loss, and reducing stormwater runoff. The key LID BMPs include dispersion or infiltration of stormwater, bioretention, and permeable paving. And the permit also addresses some optional BMPs too, that permittees, and that's what you're known as, the city of Kenmore in the vernacular of the permit is a permittee. Can also address, and those are the optional BMPs of rainwater harvesting and pin foundations and vegetative roofs. Next slide. So what we're trying to do is mimic a pre-development hydrologic process where you depending on the soils, have some infiltration, but certainly a lot less surface water runoff, a lot less surface flow. Next slide. So obviously in this developed condition, you still do get some evaporation off, say, a rooftop, but you have a lot more pollution-generating impervious surfaces, and the accompanying contaminants that run off of those surfaces. And so obviously stormwater management is much more important in this developed condition. So some of the real benefits, and I'll kind of go through these quickly so we can get really more to the permit, but LID can reduce volumes, thereby minimizing high flows. Bioretention, for instance, is a type of enhanced treatment in the Surface Water Management Manual. It can replenish streams and wetlands, can reduce the size of conventional facilities. So often what you'll see is a combination of both. You'll see some LID, and it may be used to reduce the size of a pond or a vault. Can increase open space, be visually attractive, and can result in construction maintenance cost savings. And that kind of depends on the site itself, and then can increase densities if an area that was previously designated for a pond or a vault now can be developed. One of the things that you also can do is landscaping passive open space that might be required through a subdivision or even clustering can be used for surface water management, stormwater management. The plat to the left is more of a conventional site, and what you really don't see, because it actually trails off to the left of this slide, is that about an acre and a half, almost 2 acre piece of property was required for an offsite pond in that left-hand side. So it was actually much more expensive to construct the one on the left than the right. The right manages the stormwater mostly through natural features. There is a small pond, but it's significantly reduced in size. Next slide.
So I wanted to, we're providing a couple real-life examples here to let you kind of get a visual of low-impact development in practice. Here was a new single-family home construction in just the last few years here in Kenmore, and they opted to use a rain garden, or essentially a bioretention facility on the site. And what I'm showing here is, so they directed the runoff from the new home into the rain garden, where during most of our smaller frequent storms can usually completely accommodate that runoff, and provides infiltration and bioretention. And during the larger storms, it actually does have a subdrain which connects with the existing drainage in the street there, which I've indicated with the overflow. So it's hard to see, but there's a little catch basin that existed on this street. So during these larger rain events, the rain garden doesn't just get washed out and inundated. It would actually overflow into the street system and make its way down. And for we kind of have a commercial project example in here. Down in Tacoma for the Center for Urban Waters, this is kind of the hub for low-impact development. And I think HBL was actually the consultant on this, so yep. I'll let Wayne kind of talk to some of the features that's found at this site.
Sure, yeah, we're the designers of this, but this is the home of the Puget Sound Partnership, so they wanted to employ as many of the BMPs on the site as possible. So they had permeable paving, they had bioretention. On the next slide, they had a rainwater collection system that was used for flushing of toilets. So they really tried to use most of many of the practices within the manual.
And I'll point out, too, particularly for parking lots, you can see they've used pavers in their design here. So you're probably familiar with the porous asphalt we have here at City Hall. So you can do concrete, asphalt, and then this kind of shows a paving option, or a paver option that's also pretty widely used. And then I threw in a street project. This is actually in the city of Shoreline along Aurora. And I really like this example because it kind of shows a few things that I'd like to point out. And, first, the aesthetics. This stretch right here, you can see kind of the compatibility of low-impact development, they have bioretention in the forefront of this photo. So that's an actual water's coming in here. We're getting bioretention, infiltration, plant uptake. But then as you move back, there were some utility conflicts back there. So it's actually just a standard amenity zone. So that's not stormwater treatment happening back there. But you can see it's very easy to just utilize that existing planter strip or amenity zone and use it to treat stormwater where you can, or blend it right into just a more standard amenity zone if you've got utility conflicts or if the soils aren't suitable for bioretention. And then kind of on this one as well, Wayne actually, when I showed him this photo, he's like, oh, it has weeds in it. But, you know, it's kind of a realistic photo. So, you know, in between maintenance, you know, you're going to get a few weeds and everything, but you can still see, you know, this is kind of a real snapshot of, you know, what we get out there, and it still looks.
And the reason I thought it was also good to include this one is that doesn't compromise its function. It might a bit with the aesthetic, but it's important to understand that even if you do have a few weeds, the facility is functioning still usually quite well.
Yeah, and you can always, you know, another thing I like that Shoreline did. It's not part of the you know, standard ecology, low impact development, but trash and sediments kind of often a problem with these types of facilities getting in. So Shoreline actually kind of modified the entrance that the stormwater takes from the street, and they put it into a catch basin first where garbage and sediment can kind of get caught, and then that water makes its way into the facility. So you actually notice there's not really a lot of garbage and sediment right here where it comes in, whereas other facilities I've observed, you know, usually where the water's coming in, it can just be kind of gross looking. So there's ways to be smart about how you build these. And being City Shoreline, I don't know if you had any comments.
Well, this was one of my babies. I was a project manager for this piece of Aurora, and I think the only thing I'd add is we also are letting water from the business, from the car dealership, flow off the car dealership, and maybe not along the whole length, but we actually allowed that to go into the rain garden. That's why we had to add some rocks on the sidewalk side. We were getting erosion, so that wasn't part of the original plan. But this is by where the fire station is, just north of 175th Street, and I hear it's working really well.
And another big question I wanted to touch on was, you know, who's going to maintain these facilities? And I wanted to point out that, you know, facilities, whether they're traditional or low-impact development, if they're serving non-residential properties or commercial properties, industrial properties, maintenance is the responsibility of the property owner or the facility operator. But, you know, as these facilities are built as part of a larger surface water plan, they will be giving the city, you know, covenants, drainage covenants or easements, so that we can at least go on and we can inspect these facilities and make sure that they continue to operate as they're designed, since, you know, these folks are getting credit for having these facilities and maintaining them as part of the overall surface water management plan. And then again, facilities, whether they're traditional or low-impact development, if they're located in the public right-of-way, tracks or easements, then city personnel would be going out and inspecting and maintaining those facilities. So the example I showed previously, the rain garden there on the single-family residence property, they have a drainage covenant that was provided to the city. So that was actually our inspector out on one of his inspections of that rain garden and snapped the photo.
So now we want to talk a little bit about just the integration of LID principles and BMPs into the city's codes and enforceable standards. So as Richard indicated on one of the very first slides, a condition within the NPDES permit S5C4F, I believe, 1, requires that the city do this before December 31st of this year. And so the high level elements of this is that low impact development is required unless it's infeasible for all sizes of new and redevelopment projects. Really, when I say all sizes, it's not quite all sizes, but it's all sizes of 2,000 square feet of new plus replaced impervious surface. So the threshold's pretty low. And the city must review and amend local codes and standards to integrate the LID principles, to incorporate the required LID BMPs, and to consider optional BMPs as you desire. Next slide. So the integration really begins with a gap or opportunity analysis to identify those codes and standards that already meet the intent of the permit and where updates might be necessary. So the permit kind of describes this as a gap analysis, but I actually like to refer to it more as an opportunity analysis because many communities like Kenmore already have codes and standards that are very supportive of the use of these practices. So where we see opportunities would be to require the principles be integrated earlier on into the design process, trying to achieve the principles of, and again, the principles are minimizing vegetation loss, minimizing impervious surface, thereby minimizing stormwater runoff. And so some of the methods include conserving vegetation, trying to reduce impervious surface coverage, distributing small-scale techniques across a development site, and using infiltration. And of course, adopting the ecology manual or an equivalent, and the King County's 2016 surface water design manual has been deemed an equivalent. Next slide. So the types of sections and topics that we examined were site analysis, vegetation, canopy conservation, reducing impervious surface coverage, clustering, road widths, parking design, and certainly trying to incorporate bioretention into required landscaping. One of the real goals is not to have these practices as just another regulation or layering on, but to use these landscape-based stormwater management practices where you would already be required to landscape a site anyway. So, for instance, if you're required to landscape a certain percentage of a parking lot, to do that with bioretention instead of, say, a raised parking lot landscape island. Next slide. So, with the permit, some of the things you will see more of, you'll see more bioretention and permeable paving. That's a fact of the permit, provided it's feasible. So the idea is not to shoehorn in or require practices where they're technically infeasible. And Ecology has written up about 2 or 3 pages of technical infeasibility criteria for all of the BMPs. So it's not a moving target. Designers will know what's infeasible, whether it's the infiltration rate of the underlying soil or proximity to high groundwater, or the slope of a site. That infeasibility criteria is known. Next slide. You'll see a lot more dispersion and perforated subconnections, things like that as well. Next slide. These, as we indicated, there are some optional BMPs that some communities are encouraging. I don't know of any of the permittees, either Phase 1 or Phase 2, that are requiring any of these BMPs, but some are incentivizing, for instance, vegetated roofs or rainwater harvesting, but certainly not requiring them, because these tend to be the more expensive of the stormwater management practices. This is the roadmap to getting this done by the effective date. And so the city's done a good job of assembling. You saw that internal team. We've reviewed codes and looked for opportunities. We've put together some draft codes and then also bounced those off of back off of staff and so we're here now with the council. Next slide. The guidebook that we have been using, or the official guidance that we've been using, comes from the state, and it's kind of stipulated in the permit. It's called Integrating LID into Local Codes and Standards. And actually, myself and another person from our office authored this for the Puget Sound Partnership about almost 5 years ago now. And so it has a variety of steps, about 6 steps in the guidebook. And the city of Kenmore has already finished the first 4, and that includes assembling a team, figuring out the topics to address, providing some draft amendments, And right now, we're kind of in the review and adoption phase, and then the implementation phase follows. Next slide. So what I wanted to do now is give you kind of and Alex will kind of take over, but give you a kind of a high-level summary of the amendment proposals without, we're not certainly going to read these slides word for word, even close, but all this material is in your packet. So what we wanted to do is really just kind of give you the highlights.
Yeah, and as Wayne mentioned, it really is an opportunity analysis. The first step of this process was to go through the municipal code with a fine-tooth comb and identify a lot of places where the city of Kenmore is already in line with this permit, and identify some areas where there could be potential to integrate low-impact development elsewhere where it isn't currently. So we went through and identified 5 separate titles. The primary area of our focus for the gap analysis was in Title 18 zoning. Not too much of a surprise there, but that's really where the bulk of the work came in for land development moving forward. Where can we integrate these low-impact development techniques? So just to kind of give a highlight of each title moving forward. So Title 12, Streets and Bridges, really the most of the work in this section was more definitions. How can we get the existing city definitions for things like curbs to align with low-impact development techniques? And it could be something as simple as adding permeable, allowing permeable curbs, things like that. Moving on to Title 13, a lot of definition cleanup and kind of creating a consolidated definition section and just providing kind of a one-stop shop in the municipal code to look for these definitions instead of them being interspersed throughout the entire title. Title 15, Buildings and Construction. We really looked at land alteration and, again, really definitions. Definitions is really a lot of the heavy lifting in the gap analysis is to identify incorporating the permit into the definitions of the code and moving forward. How can the city and developers be on the same understanding of integrating these low-impact development techniques? Title 17, Land Division, really focusing on subdivisions and short subdivisions. And that's really where you start to get into the key aspects of the NPDES permit, things like retaining native vegetation, looking for opportunities to encourage native vegetation retention as land gets subdivided. Title 18, as I mentioned, really is the bulk of the work here. So a lot of definition updates here. A lot of recognition for things that the city's already doing well, like maximum impervious surface coverage percentages, in line with a lot of the other cities that we're doing work with right now. So really the bulk and kind of the highlight of this section would be in the lower density residential areas like the R1, R4, and R6 districts, looking to implement a base impervious surface coverage where that can be exceeded to the current maximum with the implementation of these LID techniques. So really it's just all about incorporating LID techniques as appropriate and as necessary. One major area that we identified to incorporate LID techniques is within required landscaping strips. So allowing developers or property owners to incorporate LID techniques in required landscaping screenings, and then with the provision that it still meets the intent of those screenings. So really, it is where feasible, as Wayne mentioned. So we're not looking to create any hardships or anything like that. It's really looking at where can these low-impact development techniques be appropriately integrated into city development moving forward. And still looking at Title 18 zoning, there's some code cleanup too. Things like the golf course zone. There's a code reference where the trails don't count as impervious surface, which really doesn't fit with the maximum impervious surface coverage total that they're allotted. It's kind of two code languages that are in conflict with each other. So during this gap analysis, it really provided us the opportunity to recognize those items and kind of clean up the code moving forward.
So that's about it for the presentation. The last page here, you'll find Wayne's provided some great resources that you can follow these links and learn some more about low-impact development if you feel free to do so. And I also wanted to point out kind of the schedule moving forward. This is kind of our first meeting for the actual integration that we're having with council. Next week, we're going to follow up with a couple informal open houses for the public to come in to City Hall. We'll probably do a short little presentation and then provide materials for those folks, as well as take their comments and questions and incorporate those into our review as we prepare the second draft, which will be at a next meeting. We haven't scheduled the exact date, but most likely sometime in October you'll see us again, and we will have had a chance to review the initial public comments that we've received, questions from council, and can incorporate those into our second draft. And then following that, we'll have a public hearing with that draft, and then kind of see where we're at that point, and then if we need one more meeting, two more meetings, we can schedule those as needed. So with that, we'd be happy to take questions, comments. If it's something simple, we'd be happy to kind of, provide answers. Otherwise, we can take your questions, comments, we'll write those down and then kind of convene our committee, review those, and provide some answers in the near future.
Councilmember Sperry.
Well, first of all, thank you. This is such a huge project. We appreciate that. It was kind of weird when you said this is the third NPDES permit, because I've been here for all three. So, going back to the slide that talked about Title 18 and the removal of the provision for the exceeding the maximum impervious surface, I'd like to just know a little bit more, and this is probably something that needs to come back, is to, what the current percentages are for these, especially our downtown and our more intensely developed zones, and then what change, if any, with the LID new updates we're making.
So in terms of maximum impervious surface coverages, the only area that we're looking to amend that, and we're not proposing any changes to those percentages currently. The only change would be in those residential districts I mentioned, those being R1, R4, and R6. We're proposing a base impervious surface coverage. The current impervious surface coverages in those zones, the R1 is 30%, the R4 is 55%, and the R6 is 70%. And what we're looking to do is implement this base impervious surface coverage, that meaning that is your allowed maximum impervious surface coverage before you have to integrate low-impact development techniques to reach your maximum. And we looked at parcel data across the city to figure out what are these zoning districts currently using parcel by parcel as a rough average to come up with that recommendation. And currently, none of the residential districts are typically coming close. Of course, there are outliers that you might have a few sport courts or things like that on a property. But these base impervious surface coverages are lower than the averages that we've seen on the parcels that we've studied already. So really, by exceeding the base, you're still allowed to get the same maximum impervious surface coverage. You would just have to incorporate LID techniques unless they were infeasible.
So it's not a hard number, is really what you're saying. That there's, if you want to do something with the property that's more intense than the thing, by incorporating these techniques, you can get there.
Exactly.
In theory.
And it's also not punitive towards those sites where LID practices are technically infeasible.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Councilmember Danuski.
Thank you for doing this work. I have more of a curiosity question. So one of the challenges I know here for implementing some of the LID practices will be the high water table. So if people come into you and say, hey, I can't do any of this stuff, my water table is too high, do we actually have like a mapping of water table here, or do you go out and look, or how does that work?
Those folks coming in for the permit there's actually guidance in our technical documents that tell them how they go out and measure that and show us. So they would actually, they can't just come in and say, oh, it's high groundwater. There are a few steps that they can take to do that, but it is usually pretty simple procedures for them to. So if a single family residence was wanting to do a project or something, they could utilize a septic designer or someone who, they don't have to go hire a full professional engineer and do an analysis to figure that out.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Curtis.
So I have a question. Did you look at other zoning laws that we have on our books that could be in conflict with this? So as an example, we have 2.5 acres, and we were going to try, and we have one house. So we were going to try to put 2 houses on. And by the time we added 20-foot wide roads and sidewalks and a place big enough for a fire truck to turn around, it would have added a lot of impervious surface. So we have laws that add impervious surface. Did you look at our zoning laws to say, is all that necessary? Could some of that be decreased to actually decrease your impervious surface? It doesn't sound like your approach was quite that way.
Did you want to answer? Or you want me to? Sure. Yeah, we actually did. There are development standards that we've also looked at that kind of fall outside of the zoning and municipal code, but things like street widths, things of that nature. So we have. There's certain other things that we're trying to balance. This one of the things that I didn't mention. I figure it was part of the some of the previous presentations, but this permit. When the Pollution Control Hearings Board ruled on the 2007 permit and required LID as part of the new Phase 2 permit, they indicated that the permit was not in conflict or incongruent with the Growth Management Act, and that they were intended to harmonize. That was the legal term they used, at least in their decision. And so because of that, all of these principles of minimizing vegetation loss and impervious surface coverage and thereby minimizing stormwater aren't intended to supplant or replace, the good planning that the city has already done, its downtown plan, its comprehensive plan, all of that. It's intended to work with that. So where there were opportunities with respect to different zoning chapters or development standards, yeah, we definitely took advantage and looked to make amendments to those. But we also recognize that that throughout a city, you're going to be treating different areas differently. There might be there certainly are going to be different impervious and hard surface limits in a downtown, because you want that more urban feel like you have around here, than you would in the residential. So it's not as if there's some kind of bright line that a city needs to reduce impervious surfaces or hard surfaces by some certain percentage, citywide. You're supposed to balance this and harmonize it with all the other planning objectives that you're already doing as a city. But also to make a meaningful difference. So it's a tricky one and requires some finesse.
I think to expand a little bit on what Wayne was talking about as well, in your example, there's other factors involved. Driveway placement might have site distance requirements for safety. The fire district can only get their equipment down to a certain size. So another thing we look at is applying these things that are feasible and also to the maximum extent practicable. So there may be cases where shrinking a road is going to impact other human safety concerns, for instance, and so it would kind of, certain things may trump in certain areas.
And speaking to maximum extent practicable, just really quick, and this kind of gets back to your point, Commissioner Sperry, is that the legal standard in the Clean Water Act is the maximum extent practicable. So in the 2007 permit, there was no requirement for LID. There was a requirement to allow for it, but it wasn't a requirement that it had to be used unless it was infeasible. That permit got appealed, and this is why you have this LID. But so what is not practicable now may be practicable 5 years from now. So these different permits, it's like the Clean Water Act is a technology-based piece of legislation, which means as technology enhances and new techniques become practicable, the goalpost changes. And so you've been through all three of these permits. The next one will be different yet again. That's for sure. So in any event, that's kind of the background of all that.
Any other questions? Oh, Councilmember Smith, didn't see you.
Oh, that's all right. Thanks for the presentation. I have a question regarding, and I guess it's it'll be somewhat ambiguous because it probably involves maximum impervious areas and whatnot, but if somebody makes improvements to their site to be proactive, maybe they put in a permeable, like the pavers you showed in that parking lot, and so maybe they've done some landscaping and some improvements, not because they have to, but because they want to. Does that count towards when they go to then apply, or they want to, build an addition to their house or a detached garage or something? How does that factor in if it's already been something done before the permit was applied for?
Well, I mean, the short answer would be yes, because when they come and want to permit any work, we would look at the site in general. And so if they had existing low-impact development BMPs that were managing surface water, that would certainly be credited towards, how the site was handling and managing surface water.
Okay. No, that's great. And then, so as a city, is that something that when we get a little further along, is that something that maybe we can try to be more proactive in educating people and some of the things that they can do as their asphalt driveway's cracking and needs to be replaced or whatever happens, just so that they actually maybe are more cognizant of options out there?
Certainly. If they come and ask questions or we can, lots of times we can catch them, do I need a permit for this? And those are great opportunities to, provide that kind of education and knowledge for them to use. So did you have anything to expand on that, Wayne?
No, just that many communities are, creating bulletins that allow property owners, applicants to understand the different materials, the different practices they can use, and then also just what the how to maintain these practices after they are constructed in very kind of lay terms and easy to access and understand.
Okay, thank you. And I just had one other brief question. Can you tell me what cities are, 2 or 3 cities are really the most on top of this and the most progressive in how they're addressing this?
Well, certainly Seattle. They were doing some pretty impressive projects 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Wasn't the big cities, who do you think?
Yeah, we're working with actually several cities, and to be honest with you, no two are really alike, because the issue when you dive into a municipal code is that these municipal codes, and you folks know this as council members better than anybody, is you create these ordinances to reply to or respond to kind of the crisis of the day, and they become kind of a patchwork at times, kind of unwittingly perhaps, and so your zoning code is not the same as next door at Bothel's. It's not the same as Bellevue's or Sammamish's, and so they all deal with impervious surfaces a little bit differently. They all deal with landscaping and tree retention a little bit differently. Some calculate tree retention on canopy. Some do it at diameter breast height, and so it's really tough to compare, but everybody is dealing with it. There's about 85 cities and counties in Western Washington that are doing this under this permit, and a big part of it depends on what the denominator. Where are they right now? If they're already requiring a lot of vegetation to be retained or have very limited impervious surface coverage allowance, then the amendments that might be proposed locally are fairly nominal. Other communities, maybe more so.
Thank you.
Any further questions? I'd like to make a couple of comments, and maybe you could expand upon them. This whole area of science has changed over the years. We built a building in Bothell in the 80s, and the stormwater requirements were to put a 36-inch conduit that went around underneath the parking lot and around the whole building, and there was a 1-inch outflow. So the purpose was really to diminish the stormwater flow on a big storm, the surge of stormwater. It was a volume kind of thing. Maybe some of the sediments would settle out in this vault kind of a thing that we had. And then swales and storm vaults and all those became the common thing that was required, and it got pretty expensive doing all that. But it was still just retaining the surge of the stormwater and maybe some settling. There's a recent study that was shown to us at NRIA 8 meeting several months ago about the coho salmon trying to go through the Montlake Cut. And the reason I'm saying this is that, until I understood this sort of thing, I often wondered, why are they so picky about pervious surfaces, and what's the importance of running the stormwater through dirt rather than sewers and the storm sewers? And there is a stormwater overflow into the Montlake Cut. And if there's a storm that has a surge of flow off all the roads around there and parking lots, dumping into the cut when coho salmon are going by, almost every one of them die from the pollutants that are in that surface water. The copper that comes off brake pads and discs and so on, and what comes out of the studded or the tires, the belted tires and the rubber in tires, all sorts of things like that, get washed off in a storm situation and zip down the storm sewers into the... Now, if we can minimize that, they've also shown that the amount of mortality to the fish is almost cut to zero if you filter that water through dirt. If water goes through the dirt before it gets into the storm system, a lot of those bad things are just filtered out by seeping through the dirt. And so that's the real value of all this LID stuff, that you're running your stormwater off your roofs and off your driveways and through the driveways, through dirt, before it gets to the stormwater system, the runoff system, and before it gets to the lake and the rivers. We've been trying to figure out how we can get a better return of king salmon, or all salmon, coming back through the locks into the RIA 8 area, which includes all of Lake Washington and all up here. And no matter what we do, you look at the return cycles of salmon, and one year it's way down, the next year it goes up, and then it goes down, but the general trend has been down no matter what we've tried to do. There are a lot of things in terms of water quality that we can do to make it better, but still there are a lot of variables that we don't know about, a lot of science that we don't have yet. But the general return of the native salmon runs and even the hatchery salmon runs is diminishing. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with pollutants. And there's one study of the stuff that's going into the Montlake Cut when coho were coming by, just kills them. Mm-hmm. And that was an eye-opener to me. So to me, that's the reason to do all this. Yes, we're doing storm retention vaults and treatment things, facilities on 522 here as we're rebuilding that, and we're helping there. But every little bit of stormwater that gets into Lake Washington, if it's not clean, if it's got pollutants in it, it's going to do some damage. And the more prevention you can have in the individual property, private property and business property, the better off we're going to be in the long run.
Your point about treatment is real good. The other thing is that, we get the majority of our rainwater during the winter, fall and winter, kind of spring months. But these infiltration-based practices provide something, and it was on one of the graphics that was in your slideshow, and you can kind of go back to it later, but provide something called interflow. And that means that the stormwater then flows kind of subterraneously back to those streams, so that the streams have them during the summer months when you have that problem with low flow. That really also helps the salmon runs. And so that interflow graphic that you see is important also for the salmon runs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you look in the summer months, the rivers are still flowing, but there's no snow melting in the mountains anymore. Right. Where's all that water coming from? It's just seeping through the dirt and the mountain, the terrain, and flowing out into the rivers. So it never totally dries out, fortunately, yeah. But yes, the more we can do in this regard, the better off we're going to be in the long run from an environmental standpoint. And it was only recently that I think best available science, whatever that is, has really recognized the significance of the filtration of the stormwater and what's in it running into our rivers. So thank you very much for what you're doing. And I think the more we can publicize the why we're doing this rather than, oh gosh, another regulation on us, kind of a thing. If people understand why they're doing this, then they're going to jump on board because it makes a lot of sense. So thank you very much.
If you have any questions, comments, please feel free to just shoot me an email, and we'll get all of those incorporated into our reviews. Thank you.
Okay, the next item on our business agenda is the West Sammamish River Bridge Project Update and Architectural Discussion. John Vincente, Capital Projects Manager, and Chris Overlease, Public Works Director, City Engineer.
I'm not going to budge. I'm going to stay here.
Sure.
Oh, that's a loud one.
All right. It's a big file. It's just a bridge. It's a tiny little thing. There we go. Hello. Okay. Oh, good evening. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about the West Sammamish Bridge. Before I get started, I want to make introductions. If I'll remember from last time, we've got Kevin Kim with Jacobs, who's our lead design, and then John Owen with Makers, who's our architect. And I also want to introduce Jennifer Bassett-Hales, way back in the audience, who is with Jacobs, who's our lead through our environmental process with this project. And I am very grateful to have her on our team, I'll tell you that. So why are we here tonight? First, I want to give an update on the project, let you know where we're going, give you some information. Follow that with a continued discussion about the architectural look on the bridge, and then let you know what our next steps are. Just looking for feedback tonight. No decisions need to be made. So first, project update. Right now, we are sitting in our environmental permit process. It's a very lengthy process to get through this bridge. A lot of people might be thinking, you're just replacing a bridge with another bridge. Why is this? What's the big deal? Well, in order for us to replace this bridge with another bridge, we've got to get about 13 permits or go through 13 actions throughout or for this project, which include the NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, SEPA, which is the state one, the hydraulic permit. You can see them on the list. There's quite a few. And it just continues. Bridge permit, stormwater permit, 404 permit, cultural resources, a lot of stuff. And just when you think that's painful, we've got a lot of agencies we have to work with. On this page, I'm showing 4 state agencies, 2 federal, Recreational Conservation Office, National Park Service, Fish and Wildlife Services, and that's not all. There's also the Corps of Engineers, the Coast Guard, the Marine and Fish Service, Washington State Archaeology, Washington Tribes, and City of Kenmore. 15 governmental agencies need to be involved just for us to get permits to replace a bridge with a bridge. Now you know why I'm grateful to have someone like Jennifer on my team. She is the one that spearheads and makes sure that we get all of our permits in line and get everything approved so that we can actually build the bridge.
And some or many of these agencies are under no statutory timeline to respond. Correct. Yeah.
Not only that, but we have agencies that have conflicting requirements.
And I will get into that here in a moment.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. She's trying to steal my thunder, but that's okay. So right now, at this time, we've got a few hurdles that we're going through. The first is getting our NEPA approval, and first thing we have to deal with is the Endangered Species Act. And with this project, we're undergoing an informal consultation, which is roughly about 6 months, and
It's a process that is led through Washington State Department of Transportation with FHWA and whatnot, and a few other agencies I listed before. And we also have what's called a 6F conversion, which is related to recreational properties, and I'll explain that a little bit later. Secondly, we have a fish window. So as Chris mentioned, we have some conflicting issues here. First, we have the Corps of Engineers, which has a fish window from July 16th to July 31st and November 16th to March 15th. And the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife has a fish window from July 16th to August 31st. And what that fish window means is that we are only allowed to touch that water during those periods. Well, we found that we couldn't build the project in 2 weeks, or at least in the water in 2 weeks. And so through some great effort with Jacobs, they were able to negotiate a fish window between both agencies from July 1st to August 31st for the first 2 years, and July 15th to August 31st in the third year. And that gives us enough time to do what we need to do in the water for the project itself. And then another hurdle we've got to deal with is right-of-way acquisition. We know that we're going to have to do something. We don't know the exact extent of it, but we know we have to do something. And with our federal funds, it's a lengthy process, much like what we had to do with 522. We'll have to do the exact same thing for the bridge. We have less parcels, but it's still a process. Then secondly, as I mentioned before, the 6F conversion. The boat launch is a recreational property that has land water conservation funds tied to it. And what that states is that we have to replace in kind what we are taking. It has to be of the same size and the same value. And depending upon where we purchase it will depend upon what process we have to go through. So it can be lengthy, it can be complicated, it can be costly. It really just depends on who's willing to work with us in this conversion process. And we're actually in that process right now. So right now, our schedule is looking to finish design around the fourth quarter of 2018. Our environmental permitting, we're hoping to be done by the second quarter of 2018. Well, we're looking to start a right-of-way acquisition in the second quarter of 2017. We actually can't start our right-of-way acquisition until we get our NEPA documents approved by the state, so that's why we can't really start technically until 2017. We are looking to complete right-of-way in the third quarter of 2018 with construction advertisement fourth quarter 2018, starting construction the first quarter of 2019 and being done by the fourth quarter of 2021.
Can I add something, please?
You sure can.
I've been observing John, Jennifer, and the team going through this process. I've never experienced anything like it with this many agencies, and I keep asking John, how's it going? And one thing that makes me really happy is that all these organizations that he's been working with are working towards the same goal that we are. We joke, but it's actually true. When we communicate with these agencies, the first thing we remind them is our bridge and its condition, and that we really need to get it replaced. So I've been very pleased with the partnerships John and Jennifer have created with these agencies. They are working to help us. One thing I admire about John is he pushes back. And if we're told something and he doesn't understand, he gets clarification. And if he also says, show me, that's kind of become our one of the things that we do. And he's been able to speed up some of the processes, because when he says, show me, or does it say I have to do that in a respectful way, it's prompted a lot of good conversation. So I'm confident that the team we have is efficient, smart, asks good questions, pushes back respectfully, and they're making great progress.
And one thing that I did forget to mention as another layer of complication that we have with this project, one of the requirements with dealing with a 6F property is you're only allowed to touch on recreational property for no more than 6 months total for the duration of a project. And if you happen to touch for more than 6 months, you now have to buy equivalent property equivalent to that, even though it's a temporary touch. So Nancy and I have been working with our federal lobbyists to try and get that language changed so that we can have up to 2 years to touch land temporarily, so that we don't have to then be forced to buy permanent property for them. Right now, we believe we can do it in the 6 months, but we are working hard trying to get that changed so that by the time we go to construction, we have an extra buffer to work with.
So really what's happening is the boat launch and the money that was used to buy it has put a lot of restrictions on that property, and it really has surprised me the restrictions that the boat launch came with. Just the little strip of real estate we need to buy that's on a slope that can't be used for anything, we have to buy replacement property.
It's like 3,500 square feet, and how much was it, Jennifer? $20,000 of grant or federal money? Yeah. Yeah, so about $20,000 in federal money that was used to build improvements on the boat launch that no longer exist have permanently encumbered this property under the 6F conversion requirement. So
I've asked the question, can't we just pay that money back to somebody?
and
so
they
we
won't
don't-
now. Yeah, we have gone through every, and what's very this all sounds horribly bureaucratic, but what's been really nice is we've been working with. We had this meeting with FHWA, Federal Highway Administration, with the State Department of Transportation, the Recreational Conservation Office, and the National Park Service, and everybody at the table said, we've got to find a way to make this easier. These rules and regulations are, they really weren't written for projects like this. And so they've been working with us closely, trying to find the best, most economical and expedient process to get us through this. So nobody is telling us we don't want to work with you. Everyone is telling us this is what the regulation says, and we really don't have much choice, which is why Nancy and I were working, trying to get some of that changed. So right now, if anybody has any questions regarding what I just talked about, I'd be happy to take them before we move on to the next topic. Anybody?
I do. So I guess just, first of all, thank you. As you were describing some of what you're going through, particularly with the land that was purchased for the boat launch, is there, you know how like a lot of times we have for an exception for an essential facility or, you know, public right-of-way or, you know, basically roads, is there anything that could help? Is there any type of exception that could be created or written in? I mean, a bridge isn't like you can just move it. You have to pretty much put it where you have to put it.
So the biggest problem we have is this is federal legislation, and so to get anything changed, we have to go through Congress.
Okay.
And as quickly as that might sound,
no further explanation is needed. Thank you.
Yeah, and the rules are very, very, very strict. I mean, if you touch a property that changes any level of ownership, it's automatically a conversion. It's just a question of what that conversion means. So it's when we talked with the legislators, they said even if they do approve it, you could expect it could take up to 3 years just to get the language approved. So we're not going to hold our breath. Anybody else? All right. With that, I will go into the architectural discussion. I'm going to have John give the speech on that one, or discussion. So, sure.
Thank you. I'm sure I'm not going to bring as complicated a news as John's just gone through. I'll be talking a little bit about the architectural character of the bridge, and I want to kind of go back and talk a little bit about some of the things that you all kind of directed us towards last time we met. You'll remember we had a number of alternatives that we showed, and you kind of said you favored the kind of curvilinear shape with some angular features. You also liked the idea, as I recall, of pronounced overlook with a seating area, and you'll see that, a separated pedestrian sidewalk and bike trail. Colorful, fun, and simple were three bywords that you gave us. And we showed you a number of special features. We showed you a series of floats and different things. And the things that seemed to rise to the top, at least as our notes indicate, were the oars that indicated the boating heritage, and the runway lighting that you'll see, reflective treatments on the underside of the bridge, and maybe some concrete, decorative concrete work. So what we'd like to bring you tonight is kind of an update to show you where we've been on this and the direction we took and how we made some progress on that. I'd like to tell you that what you're going to see is a lot of details. So we're not really into the details this time. We wanted to give you some detailed drawings so you had some examples, but we're not going to ask you to choose between this or that. We just would like to get your sense of the general direction that you would like us to take. Also, you're going to see a number of elements, and maybe too many elements. So you may say, well, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on here. These are the things we like. So any of your priorities or things that happen to resonate, we'd like to hear about that. So we're going to talk about the general look, and as you see here, a major element is the overlook that is kind of off-center. If you can kind of see in your thing, it looks like it's off-center of the actual river, but it is the location that we get the best views down the river. So it's the one that, even though it looks in this thing, that does it. The overlook is a major element there, something that people felt was a pretty a positive element, and this is roughly the scheme that you chose. We've worked on it a little bit, as you can see. One of the prominent feature is the kind of seating, and you say, well, why do you have that kind of seating back there? Well, when you sit down on a normal bench and you look, you'll look directly right into the railing, you know, so you want to get up a little bit. So it's a little bit of a, it looks like a little bit of a throne there, but it's actually a step that you can get up above and actually enjoy a nice sunset looking down the river. You'll see some different railing details that you see there, and those might change. They might simplify as we go through the process. If you look at the barrier between the pedestrian and bicycle lanes and the traffic lanes, we've taken a kind of a cowl over the top of the barrier, and that would be done in metal. It would provide easier conduit, obviously, for the lights that you see on the top there. But it also, and you'll see in a minute, provides us a way of taking the same kind of character on the new part of the bridge and applying it to the old part of the bridge as well. You'll see how that might work. Also, I'd like to point out a couple things here on this slide. We're suggesting that some kind of form liner might be used. You will see some examples of that. I'm not necessarily asking you to choose a favorite, but just to show you that there are a number of options out there. And also, we've taken a look at the color, and the color, as you see here, is derived from the Kenmore signature logo. I will say one thing about the color. You got to watch out. Things out in the bright light look very different than they do on paper, so you might see the colors soften as we go forward. And like I say, here's some form liner options, and there are a lot of options out there. Some of them pretty complicated and biomorphic, and others a little bit simpler. Looking at the section of the bridge, you can kind of see, this is just by way of reminder, that the new bridge on the left there is going to be obviously much wider, and it does have the elevated platform there, and it's a slightly higher elevation than the old bridge. That one of the prominent features that will be most visible will be the lighting that you see in the middle, attached to the new part of the bridge, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Also on this, you can kind of see, if you look over on the right, that blue cowl with the runway lights, you can see can be constructed on the barrier curb over on the right side, so you'll be able to see it as you enter the town as well. Now, last time we talked, there were several comments about keeping the lights fairly simple. You'll see a variety here. We just bringing to you. One thing I think that was pretty clear was you want something that was not necessarily custom made. It was fairly off the shelf. It'll save us some money. The other thing that these different examples show is that the luminaires are changing. The ones on the right are kind of your old style luminaires. Some of the new LED lights are much simpler and much more compact, as you see there. Banners, I think most of you felt that the banners were a good addition to this, even if the thing is simple. The shared use path, we've had to take a look at that. There's a number of code requirements there for the separation of bicycle and pedestrian, and a number of safety issues related to the railing of the along the bicycle path. We think that actually the paths will be separated only visually. Probably the best way to do that was a difference in paving patterns. And you can see some varieties here. There's nothing that needs to be decided tonight, but we do think that some subtle coloring and scoring will help separate the traffic as much as is needed. And you can kind of get a little sense of how the girders and the railing works. The railing along the western side there will be higher because you have to have a higher bike railing to prevent bicyclists from going over the edge. Looking at the bottom, a couple things that we've talked about. One thing that seemed to be favored last time was some kind of reflective treatment, and the thought might be, hey, let's put it up underneath the bridge, and so people riding under it would see themselves and have this kind of unusual situation there that might be pretty interesting for them. Also, I think this is one where I think it actually helps mitigate any darkness of the bridge, so it actually helps reflect lighting, so we don't expect any environmental issues there. We talked about several different ways of treating the columns. As you see, I think people said, nah, let's not mess with the colors. And I think it was Deputy Mayor Van Ness said, you know, we got to watch out for the water tables because it changes. And so we've got to make sure that whatever we put on there looks good from the high water mark as well, and kind of accommodates the fact that you do get a kind of a scum line at low water times. So we've tried to figure out how that might work. Different examples here, as you see. Something local and appropriate to the area. So we've got a couple shots here looking at the bridge as you would come down it. Fairly accurate thing, although we've got some kind of dust storm going on over there, I think. It's a leftover from the photograph of the trees, actually. And you can kind of see with the railing and the lights on the eastern side, we can kind of and the cowling on the central portions, we can kind of make this, I think, look like it's not just a partial job. It really will stand tall as you enter into the community as well. One of the prominent features that did seem to have some positive feedback from you all was a sense of oars there. So you see oars being using as elements in special areas, perhaps a few as you enter, and then where you get to the abutments, they would be prominent as well. And here's a better shot. We'll show you some aerials for a while here to show what the lighting might look like, and you kind of get a sense of the scale. I think actually the promenade there will be quite a nice feature and quite an attractive one, and one that I think people will really use, particularly with the overlook. We've tried to generate some nighttime shots. Now these aren't accurate because we haven't selected the light fixture yet, so hopefully we'll get a better light distribution on the roadway than this shows. But it does give you a sense of what we're trying to accomplish. The general idea is to have a well-lit roadway, of course, but also that these runway lights would be a nice sparkle situation as you go down. And we'll show you a few other examples. Here's, it looks, again, this is not very accurate because we'd certainly want much better distribution in light, but you can kind of get a sense of how that would work. What you do see there on the kind of lower left is some uplighting. This is not downlighting. This is uplighting on the girders. I think there was a number of thoughts on the design team to try to do something so that the girders didn't look too plain. And there you see another option for the lighting. We of course would have still the overhead lighting for the arterial, but this would light the pedestrian area and provide kind of like a sconce lighting off the balustrade there. Then if you look underneath, that was another concern I know that you all talked quite a bit about. Some things going on. One element there that you will kind of see on the girder is a wave, kind of a blue line that kind of hangs down from the balcony there. And that's one thought. I think it might be getting quite a bit on the side of that bridge there. Another idea that came up was an uplight that you can kind of see in the upper left-hand corner and then down towards the abutment as well. So these would uplight, and we've kind of put them where the actual bridge bents are, and so they would shine on those and then up towards the oars, so it would give a nice effect there, and you get a sense. Another option for the lighting is underneath the abutment there, and we think that's far enough away from the bridge itself that it won't light the water. We have to be very careful about putting any light on the water, again, for the habitat needs of the salmon. So here's another option of uplighting the bridge. Now this one actually, there might be some concern here about spreading light on the water, but that's something we just have to look at. And there's another kind of noir look at the abutment. That looks like an art project there. And here's one with the uplighting here. Again, it makes things look very dark, but it gives you a sense of what the intent is. So the next, well, John can talk about the next steps. We went through this fairly quickly. Happy to go back and talk about any of the specific elements after John talks about next steps.
So our next steps will be to have an open house sometime this fall to present what you've seen tonight to the public, just so that they can get a feel for what we're looking at and maybe collect some comments from them. Once we do that, we're going to want to come back early next year to get a final approval on what we're doing so that we can then proceed to our 30% design, and then hopefully also complete our NEPA process and get this project designed and constructed. So if there are comments, questions, we'd love to take them.
Councilmember Sperry?
Well, thank you. I like the direction this is going, and I appreciate all the lighting and the pedestrian and bike facilities and that overlay. So when I was looking at it, I saw phase 1 and phase 2. And so everybody's, I think, at the open house is going to ask this: what's phase 1 and what's phase 2? And the other thing the public's going to want to know is, what's traffic going to be like while we're doing this? So just for maybe people who aren't aware of the staging, could you review that briefly?
So the way the project has to be built so that we stay within the requirements for maintaining traffic, the project will be built in a couple of phases. The first phase will build the far west portion of the bridge, which as we're proposing is the pedestrian area. Once that's constructed, then traffic will be moved to that part of the bridge. That would be phase 1. Then phase 2 would involve demoing the remainder of the bridge the bridge that is there right now, and then constructing that portion of the bridge. And then there's a phase 3 that I'd like to talk about, which is the following year, which is removing all of the stuff from the water and the final cleanup work that we need to do.
Thank you.
Councilmember Smith?
Thank you. I have two questions. One is on the acrylic panels with the mirrored panels underneath. What area exactly is that just under where the parking lot is, or where are I don't understand where those are exactly.
I think the intent would be to put it where the boaters, it would be where the water is primarily. So the boaters would look up and, and add a little light under the bridge and just a little, kind of a little accent to that area.
So if somebody, which somebody will, if somebody throws a tomato on them or does something stupid like that, how easily is that cleaned, or how do we clean it, or do we need a special permit to clean it? What happens at that point?
A really good question.
So as with any bridge, it would be considered maintenance, and you don't need a special permit to do maintenance on it. Now, if someone were to throw a tomato up there and it were to splash up there, I'm not quite sure how they would clean that off. That's something that we would have to look into once we finish this project, how maintenance would occur. There are several ways that you could do it, and I think a lot of it does depend upon what the rules are for maintenance.
We do have to get permission to power wash the bridges, and it can only be done at certain times. I think it's an HPA. access on, right, Rob? So we would have to, I mean, if we're power washing it into the water, I mean, I think anything that you put up under the bridge, access and how you're going to clean it is something we'll have to figure out.
So I think that's something that's really relevant as we go forward on that, because we need to have a game plan for, if we do it at all, it has to be nice, and we have to keep it nice. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it. And then my only other question was on that blue cap that goes on the concrete by the walls that separates, and it has the little lights and everything. That looks really neat, but I'm curious, will it look like just a cap was put on a concrete wall just to hide conduit, or will it be integrated into the kind of the concrete so it doesn't look like somebody just slapped a cap on it?
Well, we'll do our best to integrate it in, of course. We just showed a square section currently, but we try to make sure. I think part of what makes that stand out right now is the blue coloring, so we might have to soften that, and a lot of it's in the details, and we just aren't there yet.
Okay, thank you.
And some of those traffic barriers are not going to be removed. They will remain in place, and the cap will have to be just placed on top of it. But we will do our best to conceal it as much as possible, or conceal the connection.
Manager? Yeah, I think this is a lot of great work, and hopefully it's reflective of what the direction you gave last time. In my mind, there are a couple things that are still a work in progress that John and Chris and I have talked about. One is the street lights, those Cobra lights. To me, they seem still a little too Cobra-ish, a little too Spartan. So I think we talked about still working on some ideas for that. Yeah. And also just lighting the exterior of the bridge. I'd still like to pursue that idea a little further. I really like what Sand Point, Idaho has done with a bridge that they have. And I know we have issues about shining light down on the river and stuff, but I'd like to try to push the envelope on that a little bit, because we could really create a beautiful landmark that could be seen from across the lake, and be kind of a neat thing for the city.
Councilmember
Sperry? Oops, I'm sorry.
I was going to add to the side of the bridge comment, as we've been talking about different types of lighting, as Rob mentioned. But I remember from our tour that we took, and we showed you several bridges, I think the one thing that uniformly folks liked was that metal sculpture, the wave on the side, and that was something that was attached after it was constructed. So I think we're still trying to think about the side of the bridge and that audience, and what maybe we could do on the side of the bridge.
Councilmember Sperry?
Oh, thank you. I was going to see if anybody else wanted to talk before.
No.
Okay. So I just wanted to appreciate what City Manager, you were saying about the Cobra lights. And so just based on the drawings you gave us so far, I really like that first one where it had the much wider span, because you're going to try to connect the two together. And so is that considered a Cobra light? Okay, it is, yeah. Anyway, I kind of liked it. To me, it reminded me of like an airplane wing or something. I don't know.
Well, most of what we saw was not an actual product. I think as we get into a next phase, we'll actually look at the products, look at the luminaires, make sure that the lighting distribution is good. It's a lot of technical work. So what you saw was just kind of a representation that we're still looking at a variety of things. I think we're very hip to the fact that the Cobra head, even if you can get them anymore, look dated and are not very attractive. So we'll be coming back with a number of different ways of taking care of that. We're very early in the process as far as that goes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I think we can get that spread lighting, but still have it be an architectural feature.
Anyone else? I personally like the blue. I looked at it and saw those blue stripes and the runway, and maybe the wave on the side of the bridge could be the same blue, that would carry it through. And then maybe more uplights in a way, maybe, I don't know, rather than just two here and two at the end, more of them along it going up at that wave on the bridge. I think might be. You wouldn't need as much wattage if you had more of them. Maybe. I don't know. But I like the vivid blue. It makes it distinctive. Just my preference. So, any other questions, comments?
I had a question. Is there anything that you would not want to show the community? Is there anything you saw tonight that you're just like, absolutely not, I hate it, you know, I'd rather not have that?
I had a little concern. My initial thought on all the ores clustered at the viewing observation platform there.
At the bench, the seating area?
It looked cluttered to me, my initial thoughts.
I think we can take care of that. I think the way it's represented on paper is very different than I think the way it would be.
But you know, 3 of them at each end, and those kind. The other thought I had was all these things coming up. How vulnerable are those to vandalism? Are these wooden ores? Or are these going to be bronze ores?
These will be steel or aluminum ores. They'll be tough.
They'll be tough. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Curtis.
I would just say I liked the cluster of ores. It felt almost like an art piece there. So again, you could get it cluttered, but I think I'd want more than just 3 and 3 and 3. So.
Yeah, more than 3 in the center there, but not a dozen. Or how many there were. Councilmember Herbig.
The only thing that jumped out at me that I didn't like at all was looking at the different form liner options. All of the vertical plank or vertical wood, random wood-looking ones, they all resemble, at least to me, the sound dampening walls along I-5. And I really don't think that's kind of the message we're trying to send. They it's just my opinion, but just didn't look great to me. So other than that, I really love what I'm seeing here.
Okay. Could you show the slide of those railings again?
Of the what, sir?
The railings again. Did Councilmember Herbig just form liners? Is that what you call them?
Yeah.
It's a ways.
Here we go, getting close.
One more.
There we go. Yeah, these vertical ones, yeah. The lower right looks good to me. That carries that same wave.
Yeah.
Longitudinal, it's horizontal rather than short vertical sticks. Okay, thank you for all the good work on it. The only disappointing thing to me is that we don't get started building this thing till 2019. I mean, that's over 2 years away.
Yeah. Those darn permits and those agencies.
And that's what's taken the time. Okay.
It may even be 2020, let's just face it.
When do we get the money, though? I mean, we moved this to the beginning of the 3 bienniums, right? The funding?
Yeah.
So John, do you want to talk about how our funding falls out right now?
So right now, we've got bridge funds, which we're using currently, and they will carry all the way through construction. We've got the Connecting Washington funds, which you mentioned, which is over 2 bienniums. So we had it moved to the 2017-2019 year, and then we have funds for 2019, 2021. I get that bienniums mixed up. But so we have those funds available July of 2017, the Connecting Washington funds. And then we've got some other federal Surface Transportation Program funds, federal funds that we're in the process of obligating right now.
So John and I were actually talking today about funding, and we have an interest of obligating some of the Moving Washington $8 million, obligating it in the first biennia, even to be a match for design. We're trying as hard as we can not to have spend city money and save any of that until later. So while we may not be under construction, worst case scenario in the first biennium, we still could use it for right-of-way match, design match, lingering permitting costs. And then we'll be getting to that 30% design milestone, what was it, first quarter of next year? And we'll have a much better idea of cost. We'll see where we're at. And I think then we'll do a good job of, we have a plan now, but we can lay out the money again then with a good strategy.
And I think one thing to mention about just the general complexities of this project, given our fish window of July 1st starting, we really need to start construction January, February of any given year so that we can utilize that fish window. If we aren't able to start construction until May of a year, we have to wait until the following year or we lose the fish window. So we're really hampered because of this fish window as to when we can start, which is another reason why the construction was pushed from 2018 to 2019, because we weren't able to get what we needed done in time to advertise and start construction to utilize that first fish window. So there's a lot of juggling that we're doing here, a lot of balls in the air that we're trying to take control of, and that fish window is one of those balls that we're holding in the air.
Are there no timing constraints on the BRAC funds?
No, with the BRAC funds, once you have to obligate your design at a certain time, which we dictate. The right-of-way funds and the construction funds all have to be obligated at a certain time, which we dictate, and we do have some flexibility. And then once the funds are obligated, we've got 10 years to spend them. So, yeah.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Councilmember Curtis.
So the eternal optimist look is, all these permits and people involved, one could look at that as kind of frustrating, but look what a good deal the BRACT program was and how much money we got from that and how much it's going to help us. So hopefully that'll offset a lot of the negativity from federal agencies.
Yeah.
Anything else? Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the update. It's looking good. Staff report.
Yeah, just a couple things. This week, the State Parks Commission is meeting in Sequim. And on Thursday, they're going to be talking about the seminary project. And in particular, they'll be discussing the Department of Commerce report. And that report will talk about potential options for the seminary building. So they'll talk about those. And I believe the Daniels team will be there as well. We received news from State Park staff that even though we had planned to bring the ball fields forward for commission approval at their November meeting, they're now telling us that they want to have the ball fields approval at their January meeting, which was a little discouraging because we've been really working hard to keep this moving quickly. But they weren't really asking us, they were telling us, so I guess we have to live with their decision. The deadline on that, really, the ultimate deadline is in May when the state RCO grant agency says that we've got to have the lease approved by May in order to receive the grant. And you may have seen a recent email saying that we're ranked pretty high in the RCO grant priority list, and so we're very likely to obtain $750,000 of state RCO money for this project. But again, in order to receive that money, we need to have a lease approved by May. So in some people's eyes, that January approval may seem like plenty of time, but we all know how things can slip and slide and take longer than we thought. So hopefully we can stay firm to this January date and get a decision from the commission. I'm probably going to go for a 20-year lease because a 30-year lease requires unanimous commission approval, and 20-year lease just requires simple majority approval of the commission. And I'm already hearing commission resistance on one or two commissioners resisting the lighting issue. So it's very doubtful that we'll be able to get 100% commission approval. On another topic, I'm pretty sure that I want to have one-on-ones this week, but I'd like to meet with my management team tomorrow just to see if there's any other issues I want to talk about, and then I'll let you know tomorrow afternoon if that's okay. And that's all I have.
Councilmember comments? Oops, councilmember comments or initiatives? Start with Councilmember Smith.
I have nothing to add, thank you.
Councilmember Sperry. Dr. Curtis.
Nothing.
Councilmember Herbig.
Just one really quick thing. This afternoon, just before I came to council, I went to a meeting of the North Urban Human Services Alliance, which is a group that works on human services needs in our area and also over in Bothell, Woodinville, LFP, and Shoreline. And it was held right over at the fire district from 4:30 to 6:30 today. And it was standing room only in the room. And there were people from all those cities I just mentioned, talking about the growing homelessness crisis that the region is facing. The one-night count from this January showed a 19% increase in King County of people who were homeless in the county. We're seeing a growing need throughout the area. And something that I thought was particularly interesting was that there are no winter shelters in North King County at all. There's no place for somebody to go when it's, when we hit 20 degrees to sleep safely in this entire region. And we're forcing people to go downtown or to go to Bellevue. And even then, beds are scarce. So that's something that I'm chewing on a little bit right now, something you may be hearing about a bit about later. But I just wanted to put that out there. There's a need, and I think we may need to step up and try to find some ways to address it.
Councilmember Danuski.
Nothing for me.
And I don't have anything tonight. Thank you very much, and with that, meeting's adjourned.